What's up YouTube, Conzilla here. This is day 6 of 31 Days of Horror, where I am reviewing a different horror movie for every day of the month of October. Tonight's film was Silver Bullet. This is a werewolf movie based on a Stephen King novel called Cycle of the Werewolf. I have not read that particular novel, so I can't really weigh in on how this movie fares as an adaptation. I'm just going to be reviewing it on its own merits. I wanted to be watching a few different werewolf movies for 31 Days of Horror this year, so I was looking into what some of the best ones are, and this movie came up a lot. Compared to like American Werewolf in London or The Howling, a lot of people see this as kind of like the underdog werewolf movie of the 80s. Seemed like a lot of people had pretty favorable reviews of it, so I wanted to give it a shot, see how it was. I will say I thought it was okay. I don't regret watching it, but it didn't really, knock my socks off or anything like that. After watching The Howling a couple nights ago, I definitely feel like this was a step down from that. But not a terrible movie. This movie stars Corey Haim as a disabled boy named Marty. Living in a small rural town where a string of murders begin to occur right around the 4th of July. So basically the movie kicks off, here's your basic plot recap, spoilers alert. The movie kicks off with sort of like a town drunk walking along the railroad, and right from the get-go he gets his freaking head knocked off by the werewolf. Really nice little bit of gore there. Really, I love people getting their heads knocked off. That's always great. But of course, because it was right by the train tracks and because he's a drunk, that the town says, oh, he was just drunk and got run over by the train. Nothing crazy there. Nobody's suspicious at that point. But soon after that, a pregnant lady gets brutally murdered in her bedroom, and then there's a kind of deadbeat dad character who also gets murdered out in his greenhouse, I believe. And then after that, Marty's best friend Brady, he gets torn to shreds, as the father character says. Which at that point, the town is all up in arms. There's a murderer, a psycho out on the loose. And so a bunch of the townspeople decide to get together a posse to go out into the woods at night and try and see if they can figure out who's doing all of this. And of course, they run into some super dense fog, which the werewolf of the film is hiding in, and several more of them just, get slaughtered by the werewolf. So by this point, the town's really freaking out because now there's, 7 or 8 people have been killed. So they wind up canceling their 4th of July celebrations. So that's when Marty's Uncle Red, who's kind of a drunk, but, someone that Marty looks up to, decides to try and cheer the kid up. Uncle Red is played by Gary Busey, so that's, hilarious. And basically what he does is he builds a new, motorcycle wheelchair for Marty, and he gives him a bunch of fireworks, right? And it's like literally a motorcycle with a wheelchair seat on it. Like, Marty's speeding around town on this thing. He's trying to get himself, to go from paraplegic to quadriplegic. I don't know, it's kind of a nuts thing. But anyways, Marty goes out at night to launch off some fireworks when he has an encounter with the werewolf. The sound of the fireworks draws the werewolf in, and he winds up shooting like a bottle rocket into the werewolf's eye, thus blinding him in one eye. And so the next day, Marty tells his sister about this, and so she goes around town trying to see if there's anybody missing an eye. And again, spoilers, we find out that it's the Reverend character who we were introduced to earlier in the film during the funeral for Brady. And so they send some letters off to the Reverend, you know, with the classic like letters cut out of magazines and whatnot, telling him that he should just kill himself, right? Because they know what he is, and so the Reverend now wants to kill Marty and his sister. And they're trying to convince Uncle Red that there's a werewolf on the loose, who obviously doesn't really believe them, but they get enough evidence together to convince him that the Reverend's at least trying to kill them. And so he goes to the police, the one police guy in town, the sheriff, who's played by the actor who played John Locke from Lost, which was fun to see him in an early role. And so the sheriff goes out to see if there's, you know, any evidence of wrongdoing out by the church, gets cornered by the Reverend, and winds up getting totally murked by him. It's a pretty brutal scene. He just gets like whacked in the head a few times by his own flashlight, and, you know, with werewolf strength, so his freaking dome just gets caved in. Again, some nice gore special effects work there. And so now it's up to Gary Busey and the kids to take on the werewolf. And so they take their, you know, Marty and his sister both have like a silver necklace for some reason. And so he takes their silver and melts it into he takes it to a, you know, a metal smith guy or whatever, and has it melted down into a silver bullet, hence the title. And, yeah, then the climax of the film, they wind up shooting the werewolf with the silver bullet. Bada boom, bada bing, he's dead. So that's the basic plot. Nothing crazy. Pretty standard werewolf fare there. I would say the big downer of this movie is that the special effects work, as far as the creature effects at least, is not super convincing. And I think the filmmakers were aware of this, so they were sure to be pretty sparing with showing off the werewolf. It's got kind of a teddy bear quality to it. It's just not super scary looking and not super realistic. You know, I don't think the budget, I don't think they had much in the budget to do some very effective creature effects. But some of the gore in here is pretty well done. Like I said, when the guy gets his head ripped off, that looked pretty well. It was quick enough. And when the sheriff character gets his head smashed in, that was pretty effective. The sort of deadbeat dad character who gets killed earlier in the film, he winds up getting like pulled through the floor and he falls onto like a board that's sticking out and it goes through him. That's pretty well done. But the werewolf itself isn't super impressive. And so there's a lot of the whole hide the monster thing happening, which is, you know, at least the filmmakers, you know, knew what they were working with. Because if they left the werewolf on screen too much, it would have just been a bit silly. There was, you know, there's some decent werewolf transformation parts. I think there's one scene where they show him transforming, and it's decent. And after he's killed, he, you know, de-transforms back into a human, and it's not terrible. They do an all right job with it. There's a pretty interesting scene at one point where, you know, they make it pretty clear that it's the Reverend character who's the werewolf, because he's having this like hallucination, or it's a nightmare, that he's, you know, at church doing, you know, running a service for the other people who died out in the fog, and it's like the whole town is staring at him and they know that he's the one, and then everyone in the church like suddenly transforms into a werewolf. So sort of just like a guilt type dream that he's having, and that was a fairly interesting scene, I thought. Cinematography wise, nothing really to write home about here, but it's not terrible, you know. I did think the scene out in the woods with the fog was pretty well done. I don't know, I just love foggy werewolf scenes, I guess. But yeah, I thought that part looked pretty good. The thing that I probably enjoyed the most in this movie was the music. It's got a nice, you know, classic 80s synthy horror score, and I'm just a total sucker for that. So I thought that was pretty well done. Other than that, you know, like I said, it was okay. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. Yeah. I definitely enjoyed The Howling quite a bit more than this one. If you've seen this movie, go ahead and let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like. If you want to see more content like this in the future, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. There's still lots of great films that I'm going to be covering all throughout October, so stay tuned for that. Thanks again for watching, you guys, and I will catch you next time.